I just have one question. When Cap needed help, if I'd asked you, would you have come?
I guess we'll never know. But if you had, you'd have never been caught.
I do some dumb things, and the people I love the most, they pay the price.
Thanks to you, we had to run. We're still running.
Let's go.
Maybe you just need someone watching your back. Like a partner.
Hold on. You gave her wings and blasters. So I take it you didn't have that tech available for me? No, I did.
Well, to answer that question, we're going to have to bring in all our guests. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the MCU Review. I am one of the MCU ReVU Crew, Elliot Serrano, joined this evening by the host and proprietor of Caffeinated Comics, the podcast that the MCU Review is part of, John Clark.
Good evening. I really thought you had like a tagline for that. You were like the podcast that cares about the little things or something. I was like, ooh, where's he going? And it was like, God,
Nah, not that clever. That's why I need a writer's room. You can come up with stuff on the fly.
It's a problem with doing shows on Monday nights.
Yeah, pretty much. We are also joined by the gentleman who helped inspire this show. He is my co-host on Shaken Not Heard, a James Bond fan cast where we follow the formula of Shaken Not Heard on this show. Dave Pino.
Hey guys, how's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
Pretty good.
Do you have a gremlin on your lap?
It's my cat. She's acting very needy right now for some reason, more so than usual, which is saying a lot.
Okay, so that was an animal. There was no double entendre or anything going on there.
Yes,
because I've gotten myself into trouble that way. We also have our resident mixologist who created a custom cocktail for tonight's show, Tom Jetner. How you doing, Tom?
I'm good, guys. How are you all doing tonight?
Good.
We're not going to ask John how he's doing. Yeah.
I'm not going to volunteer either.
There's too much going on. A
long move I'm in the middle of.
Yeah,
we had boxes.
We had a pre-show talk, and stuff is happening on poor John's part. And tonight, joining us for Ant-Man and the Wasp, he was with us when we talked about the first Ant-Man movie. He is the owner of Mr. Wayne's Pop Culture Collectibles, Mike Kaplan. Mike, how you doing? We can't hear you, my friend. I'm afraid we can't hear you just yet. You want to check your mic there? Maybe you're not muted or anything? No, I can see you're not muted on my end. It's not my fault. Can anybody else hear him? Is it not just me?
No.
All right.
No.
Well, we'll let give Mike a chance to figure out his mic setting. Mike figured out his mic. See, even when I'm accidentally clever, I'm not. Mike's joining us today. We're going to be covering the sequel to Ant-Man and the Wasp. This time featuring Evangeline Lilly in more of a partner role as opposed to a supporting role. We also, this past weekend, saw the release of Ant-Man Quantumania. And I have not had a chance to see Quantumania as of yet. I don't know if anybody else on the panel has seen it. Anyone?
I have.
No?
Oh, John has.
John's the only one so far. If you want to throw some comments on that, you can as we go along. Also want to welcome Susan and Lehman, our very loyal listeners and viewers here to the MCU Review. If you're watching us on Facebook or watching the live stream on Facebook, on YouTube, or on Twitch TV, thank you so much. Of course, feel free to chime in, share your thoughts. Tell us what you thought about the movie, as well as the conversation we are having here. Mike, can I hear you now?
Well, he has to say something.
I know. I'm waiting for him. Now he's frozen. I don't know if it's because he's dumbfounded or he's just not. Folks, if you're listening to this podcast on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network, meaning you're listening to the audio version of this show as opposed to watching the live stream, none of this conversation that we're having right now makes sense to you. So we do encourage folks, if you want to watch us, you can not only catch the live stream as it airs, we have an archive of every show, the video on our Facebook page and on YouTube. And you can see all the funny little production things that go on as we stream. I'm going to give Mike one more chance. Buddy, can you hear us? Can we hear you?
I don't know if he can even hear us anymore.
No, I'm not sure he can hear us either. All right. He's gonna reboot and come back. All right, everyone. So while we're waiting to do that, let's go into what we call one of the things that we do when we talk about a movie, especially with the MCU review. What we want to do is, if we can, rewatch the film before we get into the conversation. Sometimes with rewatching, we might have a different opinion of the movie than from when we originally saw it. One of the big parts about the MCU review is that we're going back to the beginning, the start of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, going through every movie from Iron Man on forward and rewatching these films and maybe resetting our opinions on them. So did we reset any opinions? I'm going to let you go, Dave. Give us your 2-minute MCU movie review for Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Yeah, so I watched this one last night, yesterday evening, and it's still pretty fresh in my head. I think this was maybe the second time I had seen it. Only I saw it, opening night when it came in, or opening weekend, and I remember liking it then, and I liked it now, and much like. I don't remember if I think I might have actually been out for the episode where you guys discussed the first Ant-Man movie, but I just think that these movies, and I haven't seen Quantumania yet, so maybe John can comment on this, but the Ant-Man movies, by and large, I think kind of are carried on the comedic chops and likability of Paul Rudd, and I think it's evident in the first one, it's evident in this one. And I like, with a lot of the sequels, the second entry after the first film, it tends to be the origin film for its respective character, whether it's first Iron Man or Winter Soldier. You've gone past the whole origin story and sort of setting up the characters so you can dive right into that universe and expand on it a little bit. And I think this movie does a good job of doing that. At this point, we know who Scott Lang is. We're familiar with the character and the supporting characters around him, so we can kind of jump right into this new story while introducing a couple new characters like the villain. A couple of the villains in this film, new characters to the MCU. It's just a fun movie. A lot of fun action, inventive action scenes. I think the Ant-Man movies have the benefit of really being able to come up with these really inventive action sequences when you have such a small scale character who shrink down to such a tiny size with this enormous world around him. And that's definitely evident in this movie as well as in the first one. So I have fun with this movie. I think it's a good one.
John Clark.
I am not finished. I was watching it and ran out of time. So I literally had to pause it and then scan the last 20 minutes and went, oh yeah, that's what happened. I've seen this a few times. It's a romp. And I don't know how I feel about that. I go back and forth because it's very light. And it came right after Infinity War when things were getting heavy. So it was kind of a palate cleanser. But the stakes feel low, even though they're like trying to find Janet Van Dyne and trying to heal Ghost, and then Birch is trying to steal a lab. There's a lot of plots. There's just like it's like a Big Mac. There's a lot of layers. None of them are nutritious enough. And just to give basically a pre-post about Quantumania. Quantumania is such a different movie than these two that it's almost not like we can do spoilers for it. It is much more of a Marvel Universe movie, much more of an introduction to Kang. We don't see none of the supporting characters are in it. Like Bobby Cannavale is not in it. Michael Pena is not in it. Judy Greer is not in it. So it's a very different feeling movie. Whether or not you go for that or not, we'll get to it when we get to that movie, but we can talk freely about Ant-Man and the Wasp without me going, well, actually, in the third one.
All right. And Mike is back. Hi, Mike. Can we hear you?
Am I here? Can you hear me?
Yeah!
Hey, he's back from the quantum realm.
There he is.
All right. Great. Well, when I was in this movie today, I was thinking that, like, the one thing about this movie is really the plot could have been anything as long as those characters were in it. This was more about, and not that it was a huge character building movie, but I felt like this could have been a movie about literally any villain, anything, as long as we had Paul Rudd playing, had the team together, and they're off on there, like John said, like it's a romp. You know, it's just more about the fact that these particular characters are the ones portraying the events. Lot of like meat to the story, but it is just so fun, and every little quip and it's got that typical school kind of like, well, we know what you guys liked in the first one, so we're gonna just do a lot more of that. Like, we're gonna give Michael Pena just explaining the world to you, and we're gonna give Scott Lang being cute and befuddled. Bit of the movie, it really doesn't have a lot of weight to it, but I'm fine with that. Sometimes I just like seeing a movie with everything. Here, let's watching a movie, and I think this is probably one of the best examples in the MCU of that. Just
We're still having some technical difficulties with Mike's sound, but I think we got most of the gist of that.
It sounded like he hated the movie.
It's like if you could read between the lines, it was, with every pause, there was probably all right. And then let's go to Tom.
Well, I probably would echo a lot of what John and Dave and Mike were saying. And when I was doing on a rewatch, like I think I remember the first watch kind of falling asleep a little bit, of like trying to figure it out. And then on the rewatch, having just a hard time with it, having a hard time kind of getting through of like trying to figure out like, well, who is actually the villain of the story, because it is kind of like, it's very light and it's all kind of all over the place. And then I think just today I was thinking about it and I had a moment of clarity where this isn't the second Ant-Man movie so much as it is the 4-episode Disney Plus Ant-Man series that we didn't get. So this does kind of feel like a season of half-hour TV, of like a 4-episode arc of half-hour TV. You can kind of break it up into individual, because there were different parts of the movie where I was like, oh, is the movie over? Because it feels like this kind of resolved itself. And then I had checked the timestamp on it, and we're only like 30 minutes into the movie, or we're only 1 hour into the movie. It's like, okay, so they have their situation with Ghost kind of they know what they need to do for that. This is where we take a break. And okay, now the bad guys from the bag exchange are back. What time does this happen at? So it really kind of feels like a season of TV. Like if you were to binge watch something like this on Disney Plus. And it did kind of feel, as much as it is kind of short and light, I almost kind of wish it was a season of TV, because I feel like if you had two more half-hour episodes to kind of round it out a little bit, that might be a benefit to it. But the jokes are still funny, and the bits are like the whole briefcase full of who wouldn't want a briefcase full of cars that you could just of Hot Wheels cars that you could just enlarge and drive at your immediate disposal. That's just like, it's like, who didn't think of that as a kid, playing with Hot Wheels toys. So still fun, but not really, I think, quite, it doesn't hold together as a movie the way that the first Ant-Man did, and the way that other MCU movies do, which is not necessarily a mark against it. Once you kind of see it through that lens, I enjoy it a lot more, kind of seeing it as, it's just one season of TV strung together.
And I'll wrap up the 2-minute review by saying first, echoing everyone else, there's yes, this movie is pretty much carried by Paul Rudd. I remember when I first saw it, I was like, wow, they followed the Iron Man 2 formula, which is essentially take everything everyone liked from the first movie, double up on it, and have your star pretty much carry it. And that's what they did. And also, this movie holds a distinction of being one of the few, if only, film where performer Penn Jillette credits for there being actual magic being practiced in the film. The scene where Scott Lang is doing close-up magic. Penn Jillette rips movies like Now You See Me and all those other ones where there's supposed to be magicians performing, and says that with Ant-Man and the Wasp, that is the one movie where actual magic is being practiced. So kudos to Paul Rudd for getting that sort of recognition from Penn Jillette. Anyway, speaking of actual magic, can we talk about this drink that Tom Jettner, our resident mixologist, has created for Ant-Man and the Wasp?
Yes, we can. Let's see if I can get it better. It really is better kind of backlit, because you can see there's on the REVU Cocktails Instagram page. You can get a good image of it, kind of backlit. I updated that today. Yeah, that's real good. That's good. So there is what's called a gin. I think the technical term is a gin sling. It's a gin-based liquor with a bunch of herbs and sweeteners and things like that, called Pimm's. So I knew that we were going to be doing the Ant-Man movies. I had to get a Pimm's drink in there somewhere. And the most classic version of this is what's called a Pimm's cup, which is a very long drink with lemon lime soda or lemon soda or ginger ale or something like that. And I thought, well, if you shorten that into more of like a sour or a daiquiri, you'd get a Pimm particle. So the question then was just trying to get the right blend of sweeteners and sours in there. I did a first test of this with lime juice. It didn't work, but the lemon seemed to turn out very nicely. It's also Pimm's is sometimes served with tonic water. This is where you get the Coca Americano. Dave and Elliot would remember that Coca Americano as the key ingredient in a Vesper martini, at least as interpreted today. And it has a bit of that kind of quinine-y flavor. There's mint going on in here, but it's all kind of shaken and strained into a coupe or Nick and Nora, like I have here. And kind of tasting notes today. Elliot, you've got yours, but I'm getting, it's a very kind of tart and bracing.
Yes, very tart. And I will say, I did not have the fresh lemon as you prescribed. Although I remember our conversation, you said you initially tried it with lime juice and limes. I did have fresh limes, which I put in here. And I'm telling you, it worked for me.
Good.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. The only thing I did not have was the mint leaves, which was shame on me, because you have made me a real fan of the mint leaf right now with my Good Dates indie themed drink. So I'll definitely be getting more and giving this another shot with the mint.
There you go. That's
And
one
again,
of my
No, I'll say, and again, if you're not watching the live stream, if you're only listening to the show on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network, you want to go to ReVU Cocktails on Instagram. That's REVU Cocktails, where you will find an image and the recipe for the PIM particle. All the drinks, most all the drinks that we've had for the MCU review can be found on the Instagram account. Again, REVU Cocktails. And I will stop that. I think, do we have Mike back?
Yeah, I'm on my phone now. I think this is, we're going to go with 5G instead of Wi-Fi.
There we go.
Now you're coming in.
There we go. Good.
Excellent.
So, do people like the movie or what? I missed it.
We weren't sure if you liked it because
no, I definitely did. It was just so much more fun, than a lot of the other Marvel movies. That's what I liked about it. I like fun movies, like having a good time.
Very good. Now, let's take a little bit of a deeper dive as we're going about this film, especially as people. Let's say if folks are watching this show, and we talk about this from time to time, how do we want to introduce people to the Marvel Cinematic Universe? What are things about this movie that we might say make it a good intro? Like, would we say, hey, if you're a fan of Paul Rudd, you're going to like this? Or, if you're a fan of Michael Pena, who, yes, is missing from Quantumania, which is unfortunate. But, what are some of the things about this film that you feel are make it a lot of fun and a good intro to others? Let's start with you, Mike.
Well, I would say that it's hard for me because we at the shop, we get so many people who are into this kind of stuff for so many different reasons, got introduced in so many different ways. But from a lot of people I talk to that aren't really into this stuff, they remember 89 Batman and things like that. It's hard to say that there's not, that there's people out there who haven't really seen MCU movies, but just for the premise, I would say that this is a good example of how the Marvel movies are a little more bright, a little more sunny, having a little more fun with it. You can have a story that doesn't necessarily mean like a city's going to be destroyed or like the end of the world, but you can still just put together good characters, good storytelling, and I'm probably going to say it 100 times tonight, but just have a little fun with a movie. So that's what I would say. This is a good example of how like the MCU can be a little lighthearted with a little bit of weight to it, especially when you get into the bigger movies.
Because if I'm hearing any criticisms of Quantumania right now, it's that very thing. I'm hearing low stakes. It's the whole, well, you need to know these characters if you want to understand it. Like, right now we're in phase 5 right now. If you don't know the characters by this point, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't. If I see Fast and Furious 8, do they have an little intro boxes to everybody in the beginning?
Yeah.
How about you, Dave?
If I think I'll echo a lot of what Mike said. This is a fun movie, much like the first Ant-Man film, and I tend to agree. I feel myself just in general, my attitude towards comic book, big action blockbuster movies, not even specifically just Marvel or the MCU, but shifting towards like I want more fun movies that don't have to be so, necessarily overwrought and melodramatic and, on the verge of 3 hours long, which many of the most recent MCU films have. It's kind of like going back to the discussion of the Batman films. And, I know a lot of people really liked the latest one with Robert Pattinson. I enjoyed it as well, but I feel with the further removed we become from the initial release of that movie, and I look back on it and reevaluate it a little bit more, some of the reasons I tend to find myself not enjoying it as much are a lot of the reasons I find myself disliking some of the more recent MCU films. I mean, it's a little bit more extreme with Batman because, you know, I don't think we're ever going to have a MCU film quite as dark as the Batman, but just, you know, very long, very heavy, very melodramatic, and not really fun. I mean, there's fun moments in it, but I think John's the one who said that this movie was a nice like palate cleanser after Infinity War, and I think that's a great way to put it. Because yeah, it's not this big 3-hour long epic. You don't have incredibly high stakes, but at the end of the day, this is still, you know, a comic book movie. It's still it could be lighthearted and fun, and that doesn't make it any less worthy than, say, you know, Endgame or No Way Home or some of the more epic films of the last couple of years. So yeah, it's one of those movies where if you just want like a nice breezy 2-hour, you know, if you take away the credits, it's under 2 hours. You know, little action movie, superhero film with lots of jokes and you know, physical comedy, not bordering on parody or anything like that. But you know, you're not going to have a you know, intensely heavy movie, I think, when you have a comedic actor like Paul Rudd at the center of things. And it's just really fun. And I like this one. I can't decide. I probably prefer the first one a little bit more. But yeah, it's just a fun, breezy movie. And I think the MCU needs those movies like this every once in a while to kind of break up the really long, big epics that I think have sort of been defining the franchise the last few years.
John, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't this movie get a bit of criticism too because of what it was following up Infinity War? I mean, it was answering the question, where was Scott Lang during, you know, all the events of Infinity War? But just like you were wondering, well, where was Thor during Civil War?
Right, but
yeah.
that's only addressed in the post-credits sequence. The rest of the film, it doesn't really touch on the rest of the MCU, and I think that was probably the criticism to it, was people were so amped up after Infinity War, and it was like so hard to wait that year between Infinity War and Endgame. And now that we're 4 years out, we conflate the two, and we forget that, you know, that this film and Captain Marvel come out in between. So I think people were so wanting to see the end of the Infinity War story that they were just like, oh, this is in my way. But you're right. It is really light. It is really fun. There's certainly nothing wrong with it. And also the revelations in this, we've come to just accept. It was a big deal that Evangeline Lilly was playing the Wasp in this movie. This is her first appearance in costume. We got a post-credit scene at the end of Ant-Man 1, but the Wasp was a very important character in the Avengers. Joss Whedon said his first draft of the Avengers was like the Wasp and her friends. And as Edgar Wright's Ant-Man kept getting pushed back, he had to keep rewriting it. When I was a kid, the Wasp was the leader of the Avengers. Like Captain America listened to the Wasp in when there was a problem. So it was a big deal that she was going to be in this and going to be in action. And it is. There's a huge showcase, and it was a major part of the trailer when you know, Walton Goggins' character Birch screws her over on the deal, and then she takes out all the henchmen. That was all the trailer because people just really wanted to see the Wasp. And now we've seen her a few times. And the same thing with Janet Van Dyne. It was a big deal that Michelle Pfeiffer came in to play this part. And it was a big buildup. And Quantumania, I mean, Michelle Pfeiffer is the main character. So it can be very easy to look back and go, oh, yeah, it's just the same characters. But it's the introduction. There was so much anticipation to see how these characters would be portrayed that I think that was the selling point of the movie at the time.
Am I wrong? Janet Van Dyne, the incarnation of Janet Van Dyne as the Wasp is the leader of the Avengers in the comics, right?
Right. Well, because of Scott Lang, because they made Michael Douglas Hank Pym, right. That throws everything off, because in the comics, Hank Pym is as old as Captain America or Tony Stark, and Janet is the same age, and Scott Lang is a separate character. But because they went with making Michael Douglas an older mentor character, then they had to also age up Michelle Pfeiffer, which threw me that in the first film that Evangeline Lilly was Hope Van Dyne and not Janet. But that's all sorted out. And that's one of the things I like about this, and you see it in Ant-Man, is that it's the only MCU movie that hints that there was a silver age of the MCU. You know, we see Captain America in the 40s, but like it's clearly like 60s, 70s when Ant-Man and Janet Van Dyne are in action.
It's almost like kind of a James Bondish era type deal with them when they're like trying to, well, as you saw in the first movie, when they're trying to beat that missile. And yeah, that's an idea for a Disney Plus show, I'm sure. If there's anything I've had to get, speaking of James Bond, but if there's anything I've had to kind of reconcile is how different the MCU films are from the source material. And there might be a lot of nerds out there who are going to complain about it, but I mean, let's be honest. If there's anything I've learned from Shaken Not Heard, is that the Bond that we know in the movies is as far away from the book Bond as you can get. I mean, he has become his own thing, you know. And there's so many people who only know James Bond from the movies. If they read the original Ian Fleming novels, I'm not going to talk about, like, let's say the ones that come later from the later authors that will be influenced by both the books and the films. But if you look at the original Ian Fleming books, you know, it is really, it's very dry. Bond is really very monotone, very stoic. You know, I don't know if he's so much a ladies' man, you know, but he's supposed to be really good looking. Although Hoagie Carmichael, really, I don't think he's that good looking. Whereas Scott Lang, that's right, Scott Lang. I'll be honest, not my favorite comic book character. I always resented Scott Lang for supplanting Hank Pym. And I also did not like him for the relationship he had with Jessica Jones in the Alias book. That great run in Alias when Brian Michael Bendis would introduce the Purple Man and show how creepy that character could be. So to me, that bit there kind of taints my opinion of Scott Lang.
Although Scott Lang in the comics led the Fantastic Four for like a year.
Yeah, I know. That makes no sense to me. At that point, like, anybody can lead Herbie can lead the Fantastic Four. You know, if Herbie can do it, I guess Scott Lang. Again, but that's the comics.
You bring up a good point, Elliot, and that's something I want to ask Mike, because Mike, as a major Ant-Man fan and also as the owner of a toy store that has both MCU and comic as sharing one line but two very different tracks, how do you feel about it going so far away from the comics? Is it do you enjoy having like two different options, or are you like, I really like the comics and I'll accept the movie versions of things?
You got to remember that at my core, I'm a DC guy. So whenever you want to tell it, whenever you want to,
this guy's mic now, I'm going to mute him. You can come on the MCU review and go, I'm a DC guy.
Let me explain myself. As a DC guy, I am very used to the concept of Elseworlds, right? You can take any character, and if you're telling a good story, it doesn't matter what happened yesterday. It doesn't matter what's going to happen tomorrow. As long as you're telling a decent story with it, I don't care. So if you can I can look at the MCU versus, you know, the comic world as just another take on the characters, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, people get so, and this is what I was saying earlier too, people get so wrapped up in canon and why because this one guy did this 25 or 30 or 40 years ago that, they can't change anything. But characters need to evolve. They need to meet a new audience. I have no problem with that, as long as you don't do anything that's like egregious. Like, so, and I know there's an MCU podcast, but just as an example, when I saw Black Adam, I was very upset that they were implying that he was a child when he got the powers, because that goes against the premise of that character. But I don't think there's anything in the MCU that makes me say, oh man, I can't believe they did this. You know what I'm saying? Like, I would have loved at the end of Infinity War if Hela's hand would have kind of crept up on Thanos' shoulders and he said something like, "Are you pleased?" And that would have lined up a little bit more with the Infinity Gauntlet, the comic. But, they didn't do it, and it was fine. And I had a good time watching the movie. So what do I really care? That's the way I look at that.
John, I know you really like Mike, but not only did he come on here and say he's a DC guy, but he also brought up Black Adam, which you and I agreed we were never going to talk about again.
No, but I thought it was
I missed the
funny.
memo. Sorry, guys.
I thought the funny thing was the problem he had with Black Adam was that part of it.
Oh yeah. Hey, we'll do a DC podcast, and I'll lay all that stuff out for you guys.
Oh my God. Whenever nerds come to me, and I mean, to your point, Mike, talking about
At me at
canon,
Twitter, Mr. Wayne's PCC.
There you go. No, but to your point, it's like when people complain, "Oh, you did this with the character, you did that with the character." I'll go, "Okay, if you think they need to keep with everything that's ever been done, Rainbow Batman, okay?"
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember when the Punisher was an angel?
Yes.
It was drawn by Bernie Wrightson, and they swept that under the rug as quickly as they possibly could.
Yeah, they did a lot of that. Stuff. So again, it has to be pliable. I will say, I finally saw Wakanda Forever, and damn, if I didn't love what they did with Namor. I'll admit, I was a little bit leery at first, but when I finally saw it, oh man, perfect. They did it perfectly. So yeah, I think as long as they have the essence, the spirit of the character when they're doing that sort of thing, I'm cool with it.
Right. I agree with you about Namor. It was a Namor that fit Black Panther. It fit the contrast to Wakanda, but it's also a Namor that can live like with the Avengers or even with Ant-Man. It's not the Golden Age Submariner. It's not the Fantastic Four anti-hero. But that's not the ground floor that we're working from.
Now, I keep referencing Shaken Not Heard here because for folks who are watching this show for the first time, Shaken Not Heard started when Dave Pinto, our resident James Bond expert, agreed to do a podcast with me, or really a fan cast, because you can only see Shaken Not Heard on its Facebook page. It's not available on Radio Misfits like this show is. So if you go to facebook.com/Shaken Not Heard, you can watch every show that's Dave and I did. To that point, though, is that Dave, being the expert, had to kind of educate me on Bond. And as we did each show, I learned more and more about James Bond and got a greater appreciation of it and thought, wow, let me have Dave on the MCU review where he gets to listen to me, the uber nerd, about Marvel and pick up stuff from that. So, Dave, in the spirit of helping you develop as you go, were there any questions or things that you were wondering about that the rest of us can kind of fill you in on?
You mean for this movie specifically, or just kind of the MCU as a whole up until this point?
I would say you could go either way because as we've already discussed, we know that the MCU has, by this point, is its own thing. It draws from the comics, just much like the Bond books. The movies draw from the Bond books, but become their own thing. The MCU is very much doing that same thing. So I'm wondering if you were curious about any parallels or anything that stood out for you.
I guess most specifically to this movie, I guess one idea or one question I had in my head was whether the character of Ghost and then also Lawrence Fishburne's character, are those more recent additions to the comics, or do they go back a ways?
Lawrence Fishburne's character, Bill Foster, was a 70s character, and he was part of the diversification of the 70s, like at a time when they created characters like Luke Cage and Spider-Woman. So he was the new Giant Man of the 70s, and he's kind of been around ever since. Ghost, interestingly, is an Iron Man villain in the 80s, and he was a corporate espionage spy that was first of all, male and had a suit of armor that could allow him to walk through things. So I found it really interesting. I think this is maybe the furthest they've ever gone from the source material in designing a character. I think Ghost is a really interesting character in this movie, but there's virtually no connection between her and the comic version.
There was a line in the movie where I think Scott says, "Oh, you don't need the suit to walk through walls," and I thought that was a nice throwback to what she was based on.
Yeah, and I remember he died in like his second issue. I don't remember how they brought him back, but I remember he was halfway through a wall, and then somebody like ripped out a circuit in his suit, and he died halfway through the wall.
Comic logic.
Yeah. Well, the guy made a suit that walks through a wall. Number one.
Someone
If I had a suit that could walk through a wall, there'd be a couch in the basement like they're supposed to be. Dining room.
That reference, folks, is to John's current issues with moving furniture from one place to another, which I feel, buddy.
That or Star Trek transporters. I need that.
Yes. Wait, am I wrong? Was it Giant Man also referred to as Black Goliath at one point?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think they dropped it to Goliath when they realized putting black in front of everybody's name didn't necessarily make them more diverse.
Yeah, Harvey Birdman did that bit in like 1999, I think, or something like that. So,
well, that's back when Marvel Comics were woke. Remember the woke period of Marvel Comics?
Yeah. Well, it's even worse than that. It was all a blatant attempt to grab blaxploitation. It was like, you know what? Shaft's making a lot of money. Let's make a Black Goliath.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man,
that's what Luke Cage is.
Well, yeah, I know that's what Luke Cage is. I remember I've seen the early Luke Cage stuff. Of he just looks like he's leapt off of like he's being played by
like he's Dolomite.
Dolomite, yeah, he's being played by Dolomite. So.
My favorite Luke Cage moment. This was Mike Drucker, who was on our Thor show. It was his favorite comic moment of all time. There is a panel, and it's since gone viral, of Dr. Doom facing Luke Cage, and he's like, "You're that black man that's causing all that trouble." And Luke Cage responds to him, "Where my money, honey?" I don't know what the story is. I don't know what the context is, but apparently Dr. Doom owes Luke Cage money. And he's come to. It's like, you're right. It's Dolomite. You got 24 hours, Doom, and 12 of them is already gone.
And he's got like Rihanna playing in the background. I'll tell you that costume though, it still works for me. It certainly worked. The classic Luke Cage costume works better for me than the classic Iron Fist costume, where he's wearing capri pants and ballet slippers. Yeah,
just a shirt. It's just been a yellow shirt and black pants.
But it's fluffy. It's a puffy shirt. It's a puffy
collar.
shirt.
Yeah.
That original one is so 70s. The boot should have had a wah-wah built in. Just anywhere he walked would go.
Like,
hey, by the way, we're not going to cover the Netflix show.
What was the ghost costume like in the 70s then? Because this is a really specific design. It had the helmet.
80s. It had the hood. He kind of looked like he was in Cobra.
Oh,
because it was all white, but he had like puppy sleeves, and he had like a chest plate with all the circuits, which is why it was so easy to kill him. And then he had a hood and a mask with goggles.
Okay,
it almost looked like Willem Dafoe in No Way Home.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. Well, I'm trying to. Part of my thing with this movie is trying to figure out whether they wanted to make Ghost the villain or the anti-hero or something, because it seems like the movie is trying to kind of have it both ways. And
honestly, I don't think Ghost is that strong of a villain. You know what I mean? Like she's trying. I mean, she's selfish. She's trying to help herself and everything. She's just trying to get out of pain, which is sympathetic and everything. But at no point do I feel like, oh my God, if Ant-Man doesn't show up, the whole world is in danger.
Ghost is a henchman level.
Yeah,
like worked for a big bad, but not big bad level.
They don't have.
But I feel like about all the antagonists in this movie, because Lawrence Fishburne and Ghost and Walton Goggins, all actors I really like, but like you said at the beginning of the podcast, Elliot, it's the Iron Man 2 version. And the thing that always bothered me about Iron Man 2 is that it has a henchman and a comic relief and no mastermind in the center.
Right.
And I feel like with this one, they try to make everybody at least a little sympathetic, so no one is threatening in this movie. Even like when Bill Forster like ties up the three of them, we're not scared of him. We just want to know what he wants.
Well, I think that's why they had to add the FBI side of it too, because that gives you something where that adds tension like 3 or 4 times in the movie. It's like, oh no, the FBI are going to the house, or you know what I'm saying? Because without the major villain putting their backs against the wall, I think you needed the FBI to kind of be like, there's a timer on this, or there's just some sort of gravity to the situation.
Yeah, it's the ticking clock. It's like Scott's constantly like, oh, I got to be back before Randall Park shows up at my house.
Yeah,
and it's like,
but who doesn't? It's like everybody likes Randall Park. You can't make Randall Park a menace.
I want Randall Park to come to my house.
No, Randall Park's going to show up to my house and geek out about close-up magic. Like,
yeah, right. He's going to ask if I want to go get some food, get some dinner.
Stop threatening me with a good time, Marvel movie.
I gotta point this out too. With his character, the evolution from the moment of how did you do it, and then he asks about the close up magic, and then in the scene in his office where he's trying the close up magic, and he can't do it, and he's like, why don't you knock? And then by the end, WandaVision, when he shows up, he's got the business card, and he goes, and he's got it. It's just it shows that his time with Scott Lang meant a lot to him.
I believe there are some, if you go on YouTube or they have it on the Disney Plus, there's some, those last lines, there's some improvisation going on between the two of them. Like, you want to have dinner? Yeah. What are you asking me out? Well, maybe. Yeah, it is. It's really very cute. And yes, it's a great character. Speaking of the gravity of the situation, which was 3-4 beats ago. So I'm pulling that back. After seeing this movie, I wanted to make the in-house roller coaster, the cardboard roller coaster that they did. I was like, oh my God, I wish I had a second floor so I could do that sort of thing.
That was the most prophetic part of the movie for me, is that it opens. Now, this is in 2018, but it opens with Scott Lang in house arrest for 2 years. And I'm like, oh my God, in a year and a half, we're all building cardboard roller coasters.
Yeah, right.
I want to throw on the screen real quick here, Dave, our Marvel noob, though, came up with this. Looky. It's how Ghost looked in the comics. For those who are watching the live stream. And I do believe was also created in part by Bob Layton, which is why Bob Layton, you will see him at the red carpet premiere of Quantumania, because there are so many characters in the Ant-Man mythos that he was involved in creating as part of his run on Iron Man, of all things.
So, John, that whole, aside from obviously the gender swap thing, but the whole sort of tragic backstory that was all totally created for this movie.
The original Ghost was a dick. But I thought his costume was so cool because I was a 13-year-old. It was 1985, and he, as you said, he looks like Moon Knight from Wish.com. But he looked like the fifth Dreadnought to me.
Oh man, we gotta drag poor Moon Knight into this. We haven't gotten to the shows yet.
No, it's counterfeit. It's counterfeit Moon Knight.
Yeah,
it is. It's counterfeit Moon Knight. It's
like back in the day when they had the movie and they'd make a TV show of the movie. That's who you got in the TV show.
Yeah, that was what was it, Delta House?
Oh.
Wow. You know, it's weird.
Robert Hayes Starman.
Yeah, exactly.
It's in both cases. I saw the television shows before I ever saw the movies, which is a shame. That explains a lot about my childhood. Anyway. All right. I don't know. I know, Mike, you're there, and I'm not sure what state your moving is in right now, John. Are we going to
I'll have to go to another room because I do know where the Marvel Legends for Ant-Man and the Wasp are.
Okay. Well,
there's not a lot of them. We basically got a new Ant-Man and a new Wasp, and then Ghost and Luis were in a 2-pack later.
With the building and Anthony.
Yes. The most interesting thing about it was it's at the time when they're starting to do 3D scans, and the Paul Rudd head is smirking to a point where he went on Conan O'Brien and said, "Look what an asshole my toy is." So I will turn up my camera and see if I can find that while you guys continue.
Yeah, those are great figures. The head sculpts were amazing. The Evangeline Lilly head sculpt is just great. I actually have been working on I want to get a Kate custom from Lost done because that head sculpt is so much better than the McFarlane version that actually did for Lost. So, but the problem is she's smiling, and Kate never smiled in Lost.
No, Kate did not smile enough. And I'll tell you though, I will say, I had such a crush on Evangeline Lilly after Lost.
Mm-hmm.
Although she's doing everything she can to spoil that crush, I'm telling you, her social media presence, a lot of stuff that she does. Ugh.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really don't know.
I try not to pay attention,
Yeah, no, which is probably the best thing to do. So, Mike, what do you have any? You don't have any Ant-Man toys there on hand, do you?
Oh, I don't think I have any in the shop actually. He's a pretty popular character. The Wasp, the Wasp figure, the Ghost figure, they moved a little bit, but any kind of Paul Rudd thing, any of that version of Ant-Man, that goes like right away. Yeah, and unfortunately I don't. I'm trying to think of maybe a Funko Pop or something, but unfortunately not.
Has there been a release for Quantumania?
Not yet. No, they haven't done anything yet. They haven't given any kind of actually, honestly, John, believe it or not, John's always like, he informs me of a lot of stuff. But yeah, I don't believe, I know there's none out yet. I'm kind of curious what they want to do with it, because with Marvel Legends, you're going to be talking about Build-A-Figures and, maybe 2 waves for a movie as big as Quantumania. So,
while John's getting that, is there anything on the horizon for Guardians of the Galaxy, which is going to be the next thing coming up?
Oh,
I did not find asshole Paul Rudd, unfortunately, but I did.
Give me a chance. Hold on a sec.
I did find the Evangeline Lilly, which is a really good likeness, and then I found the Luis, which also comes with the building. But that's about all we got, other than the Ant-Man and the new suit. However, since Mike owns a toy store and is in there, there's a very good chance that he'll turn up the other figures. There's also
he says he doesn't have a lot because they sell really well. He says he's not sure. So can you show the Wasp again?
Sure,
so people can get a good look at it.
Yeah, the likenesses are getting really, really good. We mentioned this the last few movies, and of course, she does have a switchable head with the helmet, but it's really the likeness that's the drive. So there are only 4 figures out of this set. Which is, and in fact, for Quantumania, we're not getting that many. We're getting
no. I was just saying, I think they'll do a second wave down the road, like they did with they've done that with a couple movies.
Yeah, they have. I think, but in this set, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. We're getting like Ant-Man, Kang, and Cassie as the Build-A-Figure.
That's what I didn't know. I didn't know who the Build-A-Figure was.
Yeah.
I think at this point they should. They'll probably do like an exclusive 2-pack with Hank and Hope. I would imagine. The new costume for Evangeline Lilly, that'll probably be a figure they're going to want to do as well. And the hair, they're going to want to do her pixie haircut. The traditional Wasp.
Yeah, now she looks like your crazy aunt.
It does look right to the comic though.
Yeah. And she
also looks like my crazy aunt. So,
but she definitely has like the aunt that only eats organic.
Yeah.
I was saying, John, while you were away, that's kind of like how she's behaving on social media right now too. Like,
eventually, Lily's a weirdo.
Mm-hmm.
She's always been. I remember when she did The Hobbit, she went, or it might have even been Lost. She went on Conan and only talked about how much she likes earlobes. She's odd.
All right.
Yeah, it works for me.
I wonder
if Paul Rudd always goes on Conan and shows that one same clip from McAfee every single time.
Yes.
It's the longest running gag in Hollywood.
And
so funny.
Yeah, Mac and Me became the one of the first Netflix Mystery Science Theaters. If you want to see the entire movie and you can't watch the entire movie, The Mystery Science Theater Netflix season will get you through that really well.
That's good to know. Could you talk about there are like toys in the movie used as kind of props in the movie. That's something that's a feature of the Ant-Man movies, is that the action kind of they're able to do fun things with the action that are different from most of the MCU, because they've kind of tweaked the powers with the little discs that enlarge or shrink items depending on how it's set.
Well, the first one had a lot of stuff with like Thomas the Tank Engine and the stuff in Cassie's room. Like that was a huge scene. This one, the thing that really stood out to me as a toy guy was the end credits. They have all the figurines and the miniatures, and I swear the one that's the big the big Ant-Man on the truck, pushing it like a skateboard, that looks exactly like the Build-A-Figure Ant-Man. Just it looks like it's been molded in over the joints, which we've had to do for people turning action figures into statues. So I looked at that and I just it was driving me crazy. I want to know, is that the Build-A-Figure or the deluxe one they did a couple years later? But yeah, a lot of toys. I mean, the whole miniature thing and the sets, and whoever did those is just brilliant. The splashing, the glass that's kind of shooting out, they're done really well. Look like when people do model train sets, those kinds of things, when they get really into the detail. That's what it reminded me of, an Ant-Man model train set. Which, again, going back to the first movie, yeah, maybe that is what they were thinking.
I just want to know that when the building returns to its regular size, is there a giant handle and giant wheels down in the foundation?
Yeah,
because
they show it.
Yeah, I think, well, those handles telescope.
Yeah.
My question is, when people are picking it up and running around, what happens to the toilets?
And the furniture and everything inside at the very end of the movie, he pulls the house out of the little box, puts it up. I just thought, so if that's been in his pocket or his bag, every chair is broken, all the pots and pans are out of every drawer is turned upside down. It's like, that's got to be a wreck. Why would you do that? Unless you literally nail everything down. I don't know.
That's why when Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about these films, he just takes it apart as if he needs to, because they still haven't explained to me how can Ant-Man shrink that small and still not weigh as much as he would,
Well, that's something that drives me crazy, and I didn't want to bring it up because I'm an adult. But sometimes he has the same weight when he's small. Because in the comics, they would say he would punch. He has a regular punch, even though he's that big. But then in the movies, like in the first movie, even like he has a tank on a keychain. It's like if that weighed the same that it already did, that's going right through your pants.
Well, the supposed science is that what the Pym particles actually do is change the distance between molecules.
So it should be the same weight.
So it should be the same weight because you have the same number of protons and neutrons
So you couldn't carry that Hot Wheels thing. It would weigh 70.
No, it would literally go through your hand if you ever tried to pick it up, because it would be so heavy coming down on such a small point. You have something the size of a tank in like 3 centimeters by 2 centimeters. That it would be like a bullet. It would be a bullet.
Yeah.
Because even though the volume decreases, the weight and the mass does not. So it's almost like a dwarf star. It's like, all coming together. It's like collapsing in on itself, and it gains mass. And add to that, it should probably like have its own gravitational pull too. So not to get all science nerdy and busting that out, but Neil deGrasse Tyson does talk about that and kind of spoils it and everything.
That's why they had to have Paul Rudd to do this, because otherwise your eyes would start to bleed if you thought about it for too much. But then you see a 3 foot tall Paul Rudd running around, and you just go, "Aw."
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the whole key sequence when the suit starts malfunctioning, which is really fun, and he transforms into a 7-year-old.
That's kind of cool too, because that's a trope that I don't always get behind, is the idea of the superhero somehow having to lose his powers every time. Like, I think that kind of counteracts the point of a superhero. But they handled it really well in this, because like just sometimes, I'm big and I can't get small, and I thought they handled it. Doing it with comedy kind of points it out and makes it not as big of a deal to me.
And then that joke will come back in Endgame when they turn Paul Rudd into a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Which, by the way, is mentioned in Quantum.
Yes, I was about to say, see Quantumania, everybody.
Yeah. And it's a tie-in, but in Quantumania, it's already been revealed in the trailer that Scott Lang has written his autobiography, Look Out for the Little Guy. It's an actual book.
Mm-hmm. It's also teased in Wakanda Forever on the CNN clip. It says across the bottom, Scott Lang has released his book today, something to that effect.
Yeah, what I want to know is, does Paul Rudd read the audiobook? Because I will buy that.
I think that they have a clip circulating online that Paul Rudd does read. There's a clip from the movie of him in the car listening to himself reading his own audiobook.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
But that's like one of us like listening to the podcast like a couple of days after.
Well, that's me.
I was gonna say I'm not supposed to do that.
I listen to it just to check the audio quality to make sure, and also to make sure that none of us said anything overly offensive that I missed at some point. Dave, you've gone really quiet there.
I think
Just
he's
listening.
He's just listening.
traumatized by the original Ghost.
I'm disappointed that how unfaithful to the comics this movie was. It's shaken me to my core.
Normally Dave has finished his drink by this point in the podcast, so he's doing this one clean and sober. So
yeah, that you know of.
That I know of. I don't know if that's vodka you had in that glass, or if it's. I'm going to be nice to Dave and say that it's gin, not vodka.
Actually, if you add a couple letters to gin, you close. I'm drinking ginger beer.
Oh, that is.
I almost freaked out a little bit right before going into the show. My stomach started to hurt really bad. So actually, Elliot, I made a cocktail yesterday that was recommended to me by Dr. P, which required some ginger beer. So I bought this big bottle of ginger beer from Binny's, and I had a bunch left over. And that has seemed to settle things down a little bit. So I'm feeling fine now, but no alcohol in my system at the moment.
And that is not my fault, because I got the drinks and I delivered them to one Dave Pino that were sitting there at the office for you. In fact, you were tasked with getting them to John, who would be downtown, hopefully, to get them. But
I was downtown last week, but I was not able to leave my desk at all. Yeah. And this week I am arguing with movers. So
it'll be waiting for you. No worries. It'll be waiting for you.
Trying to get my bookcase back.
All right. So, hey, I think for the most part, we've enjoyed Ant-Man and the Wasp, just much like we're going to tell folks they should enjoy Quantumania. It seems to me like they've pretty much followed through in the same spirit of the Ant-Man books. Have a little fun.
No,
I would just say it's a good trilogy. When I look at it, it's like, it's a good journey to go along. I think it's a fun movie, and it doesn't necessarily, you don't need to know everything that happened, but it, in the third or in the first two to get the third one or whatever. But like, I just think it's a real fun trilogy on its own.
Yeah,
spoiler.
The new one is definitely standalone. I think it's going to be very important moving forward. Like when the Avengers comes around, I think if you want to know who Kang is, you'll have to see Quantumania. I think he's really the focus, and Scott's reacting to him. But it's interesting how much setup he had, because I went to see it with my girlfriend, and there is a teaser. There's no spoilers. There's a teaser that just shows Jonathan Majors for a second, and before the title, and she was like, "Who's that?" I was like, "The guy in the last episode of Loki," and she went, "Oh my god!" So they're doing a great job of building him up to be the next Thanos.
Oh yeah, a great jump off point for the next phase. This is a great way to start.
Well, I mean, you could have said Loki was probably it. because Loki, well, it's what He Who Remains is what they're called.
Yes.
I love that bit in, well, if you go online, you will find Jonathan Majors and Paul Rudd do the Wired Asks, the most commonly asked Google questions, and they do the bit. And one of them is, who is Jonathan Majors Loki? And they're like, what? And then, and Jonathan Majors is having fun with the phrasing of the question, but then he goes, they're referring to He Who Remains at the end, the last episode of Loki, which we knew then. I'm like, oh, wait, that's going to be Kang.
He drops the word conqueror.
Right.
Yeah.
Jonathan Majors is another quirky guy. I recommend you go back to Peacock and watch the SNL he hosted last year.
The guy, I'm telling you, he's hot. He's going to be in Creed 3. He just did Devotion. He's, of course, going to be having a run in the MCU. Dude was on The Wire for how long?
He was? I don't remember The Wire.
So I would say good for him that he's getting this this recognition, and everyone wants. Oh, I'm sorry. The HBO show, the Lovecraft Country. That's where a lot of people will know him from. So I think it's great. He's out there. The guys showing up at the NBA slam dunk contest, 3-point contest on courtside, doing that sort of thing. You got to ride that. You got to ride that lightning while it'll take you. Take that heat, keep it going as far as you can go, because you don't know how long it's going to last. And then they drop you. All right. Speaking of dropping, before I drop any of y'all,
what finale?
Final thoughts on Ant-Man and the Wasp. Let's start with you, Dave Pino.
I think I said everything I wanted to really say about this movie earlier. It's a fun movie. It's a nice palate cleanser following Infinity War. It's carried by the strength of Paul Rudd, his likability, his comedic chops. Again, not the super high stakes movie like Infinity War, Endgame, or even Multiverse of Madness, to use a little more recent example. But I also don't think they all have to be. I think you can have these little fun, sub 2-hour movies once in a while that have a little smaller scope, and they can be just as enjoyable as the big 3-hour epic. So I'm a fan of this one.
Tom.
I think that there's a lot of pieces of this movie that I really like. Like I kind of referenced it earlier. I love how inventive they get with the action. And the size changing thing is a power that wouldn't necessarily work for an individual action sequence. Like he shrinks, he gets bigger, he gets smaller. Like how do you make that into an action, or how do you make that into a fight scene? And they managed to do it a lot. They do a great job with Wasp, with the Wasp powers and things like that. And in terms of making a fight scene with a character who phase shifts like Ghost, they did a good job. They did a great job of that. I wish it held together plot wise a little bit more, but I think once I kind of let go of the reins a little and just kind of let it take me where it wanted to go, like that, I was able to enjoy it and have more fun. So you have to kind of shut off a certain part of your brain or rephrase the way you're looking at it and just kind of enjoy the individual. We didn't even talk really about Michael Douglas, who's again great in this movie, just like he was in the first movie. In terms of being just cantankerous and Michael Douglas-y throughout the whole movie. So yeah, I think that about sums it up.
Mike.
Well, I would say if you like action movies, you like this movie. If you like comedies, you like this movie. If you like comic book movies, you like this movie. If you like Paul Rudd, you'll love this movie. It's just a great time, and I feel like that, and again, this has been said a couple times tonight, but sometimes movies have to be this thing that makes everything else better, when I would just look at this movie as just, man, I had a great time watching it. And if you have 2 hours and you need to kill 2 hours you need to kill and you just want to do something fun, this is a great movie. I absolutely love. I do love it. So there you go.
And John.
Movies that are fun do make everything better, Mike.
That's
the whole point.
Yeah.
It's so you sit for 2 hours and live somebody else's life for a change. And now they got big, comfortable seats. Yeah, this movie is enjoyable. It is very light, which is fun, but I find it so light that it's not a movie I go back to over and over again. Whereas something like Ragnarok is light, and I've probably seen it much, much more than this movie. But it is enjoyable, and there's a lot to be said for how likable Paul Rudd is. I think this is the year where he was the sexiest man alive, and really carried it off. And for Quantumania, he was just on Colbert, and he was showing that both he and Jonathan Majors were in Men's Health. And Jonathan Majors is jacked, as you said. He's in Creed 3. He's like jacked by the pool standing like this, and he's like, and here's me, and he's like in a black t-shirt, just smiling. About a year ago, when people were like, "Oh, every celebrity's gonna get canceled. Every celebrity's awful," somebody asked, he's like, "Is there any celebrity that everybody likes?" And I answered Paul Rudd, and it was the most likes I ever got on Twitter. Paul Rudd is just a very, very enjoyable person.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an enjoyable movie because of that. But also, you're right. Everyone's enjoyable in it. Evangeline Lilly is fun. Michael Douglas is one of his more entertaining performances. Michelle Pfeiffer is basically a cameo, but she really puts her all into it. I love Walton Goggins in anything ever since Justified. And he's having a ball. So, yeah, totally worth a watch.
People love Paul Rudd for a lot of reasons. One, that he has no social media, so he knows not to say anything dumb to get him in trouble. And he also has probably one of the best, if not the best episode of Hot Ones, when they do the Hot Wings challenge. I'm telling you, it's a great interview. It's a great, although I think Paul Rudd cheats in that instead of doing chicken wings, he does breaded cauliflower wings instead.
Yeah, but it's not about the meat.
No, but the chicken wing holds on to more of that hot sauce than the breaded cauliflower does.
And I would say, if you think that's the best Hot Ones, you really need to see the Key and Peele one, because by the 7th hot sauce, they don't answer any more questions. They just curse out the host. And they do it together.
Well, of course, there's an Idris Elba one where Idris is ready to challenge him to a fight. It's like, you want to fight? I will fight you right now.
My Apple TV, for some reason, kept remembering that I was watching Hot Ones, and it used to. They don't do it anymore, but it used to show you like this big still image of the next episode, and it was Jeff Goldblum eating a hot wing. And I was like, I'm never watching that episode because it'll stay on my home screen all the time.
You don't want that.
It's hot, it's spicy. It's in my mouth. Oh, it's hot. It's going down. You can't not watch that for a half an hour.
Oh my. That's the second week in a row you've done your Jeff Goldblum.
I'm really working on it.
All right.
It's workshopping.
It could be another segment in the show. 30 seconds. John as Jeff Goldblum reviews the movie.
You guys have seen the Conan O'Brien Celebrity Secrets with
yes.
Goldblum, right? People always come up and ask me,
one.
do you prefer Goldblum or Goldblum? And I always tell them the same thing. How dare you speak to me?
There is a great Conan O'Brien needs a friend with Jeff Goldblum, and he's like, "You're the most sensual man I've ever met." And he's like, "Oh yes, in life." It's like it's an hour of Conan O'Brien being awed by Jeff Goldblum. I highly recommend it. Oh, and Jeff Goldblum is also Stephen Brown said he's the most gender fluid for Jeff Goldblum. We should have brought all this up on the Ragnarok episode.
It should be GFFJG. Okay, so GFF, gender fluid for Jeff Goldblum. Okay, we'll make little bracelets for that. All right. Well, before we tease the next episode, why doesn't everyone tell us Where can we, Mike, tell us, how can we learn more about Mr. Wayne's Pop Culture Collectibles?
Well, we have a website that is MrWayne'sPCC.com, and all our socials are at Mr. Wayne's PCC for Pop Culture Collectibles. And of course, you happen to be around, we love to just have you come by the shop and we can talk a little MCU, talk a little whatever you want. We're located at 10 West Burlington Avenue in Westmont, Illinois. And yeah, just stop on by. We'd love to have you come by, talk a little MCU, talk a little Star Wars, talk a little DC.
And as another endorsement, Mike is the reason that half of my moving boxes say Entertainment Earth.
Hey, I like to help out where I can, John.
Yeah, I'll talk MCU to a real Marvel guy. Of course, I'm kidding.
I know.
Tom, where can we learn more about your cocktails?
You can find the Pim Particle and all the cocktails on the MCU review, and also all the pop cocktails that will be on Top Men, the Indiana Jones podcast, at REVU Cocktails on the Instagram app.
Dave?
I am on Instagram at Pinto_Noir.
And why should we follow you?
My little four-legged goblin, my 11-year-old Chihuahua mix Dexter. Plenty of photos and stories of him on there. Who's going to be famous soon, by the way.
Yes, I saw he had a photo shoot.
Yeah, and I was one of the select few. Picture of me holding him will be on a banner outside of our place of employment shortly.
Yeah, he's a good. I mean, it's for the dog, mind you.
Of course. Although in the picture, I wore like a sort of like a charcoal gray sweater, and he kind of blends into the sweater in the photo.
So
I'm holding him, and it almost just looks like there's a dog head growing out of my chest.
All right. I'm sorry, John.
What are you sorry about? I'm sorry, I'm John too. But you
one
can,
of those nights,
if you're
folks.
not listening to this on the audio feed, every episode of the MCU Review and Top Men come out on the Caffeinated Comics podcast, celebrating 10 years of podcasting with the Radio Network. You can listen anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also follow me at Not In My Book, where I on Twitter and Instagram, where I showed pictures of my house and did not give the address.
We can just zoom in, pinch and zoom in.
And it's the Zillow shots. I'm not in it.
There we go. And yes, speaking of Top Men, if you're watching the live stream next Monday, we're back talking about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and we're going to be joined by special guest John Singh, formerly of Lucasfilm, part of their PR and marketing firm. It has his own marketing firm now. Is going to be joining us talking about his favorite Indiana Jones movie. And we will also have a themed cocktail created by our very own Tom Jetner for Temple of Doom, which should be a lot of fun.
Out for Top Men that I need to make my ingredients easier to find.
Yes.
So this should be fairly simple. We don't need to do the type of logistics that often wind up with multiple members of the panel sober on a given night.
Well, I mean, I finished mine, and it wasn't that much of a kick to it. It wasn't like the Thor, the Dark World one that you did. Woo!
Yeah, that had a lot of Smith and Cross in it. That was very powerful stuff. This is Pim's is only about 30% alcohol content. Yeah, that's quite light.
And the next MCU review before we get into Endgame will be Captain Marvel, and we have a very special guest lined up for that one too. I'm not going to say it because I don't want to jinx it, but we will be joined by actually a hint. She is a Peabody Award winner and a former colleague of mine from the Red Eye, and very let's just say she's very popular on the social media, and won a Peabody working on a documentary with Sarah Spain of ESPN. So you Google it, you'll find her. She's a good friend. I'm really happy that she's coming on to talk Captain Marvel with us in March. And of course, you can follow me on all the socials at Elliot Serrano, 2 L's, 2 T's, and 2 R's. Folks, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Lehman. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everyone who is watching on the Facebook stream, watching us on YouTube. By the way, if you go to our YouTube page and you go straight to the page, it's going to say this page has no content. Lies, I say, because if you click on the header that says live, you'll find all the video, all the live streams, all the recordings of the live streams that we did on the YouTube page. So by all means, make sure you click on there. Give us a like, subscribe, check us out. I was astounded to see that our Shaken Not Heard page, a lot of Pierce Brosnan fans out there. Our reviews of Die Another Day and The World Is Not Enough has a few thousand views. I think 7,000 views for The World Is Not Enough. Or no, Tomorrow Never Dies. No, or is it Die Another Day? I think it's Die Another Day. It's got over 7,000 views. Maybe it's because we were just hammering on that one, Dave and I.
Could also be that there's just no accounting for taste.
People just want to know, what did they think about Die Another Day? But no, I'll always say there are no bad James Bonds, just poor scripts. So anyway. Check that out. Check out please, if you're seeing this for the first time, give us a like, give us a thumbs up, subscribe. When you see these videos, the more people like and subscribe, the better our metrics, the easier it is for us to get more and more guests. Not that we don't appreciate Mike helping us during our humble beginnings here. But please check out, again, Mr. Wayne's Pop Culture Collectibles. I'll put aside my DC fanboy bias and I'll come by and we'll talk.
All right, good. We'll have a discussion. We'll have a real discussion about it.
There's nothing to discuss.
Honestly, Elliot, I couldn't agree more.
No, I'm fine. Of course I kid. The one is my little brother. We've talked about it on my show. My little brother, who is a real huge DC fanboy, he's given up. He's thrown after what happened with Henry Cavill or Cavill, depending on how you pronounce his name. He's done. He's just done with the DC universe now. He doesn't care what James Gunn does.
Right. We'll see in 5 years what he says.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah. All right. But anyway, thank you, Mike. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panel, for being here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, whether you're watching us live or listening to us on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network. Thank you so much. This has been a very big conversation about some little things. How's that, John? Would that work? All right. He's just nodding. All right, folks. Good night, everyone.